In 1969, the book The Left Hand of Darkness was released. It is a groundbreaking novel exploring what it would be like to have a planet where everyone is androgynous most of the time. Biologically, they function completely different when it comes to sex and reproduction. I, Vanessa Júpiter, read it for the first time 6 years ago, before I knew that I was trans, before I even properly knew what non-binary meant. Let's talk about it! Light is the left hand of darkness, and darkness the right hand of light. Two are one, life and death, lying together like lovers in camera, like hands joined together, like the end and the way. After 6 years, coming back to it was really surprising and at points confusing. The main part of the story that I remembered was the friendship and the love between Genli, the human envoy, and Harth, Estraven, the Gethenian. A friendship so much needed by both of us in our exile, and already so well proved in the days and nights of our bitter journey that it might as well be called, now as later, love. Referring to The Left Hand of Darkness as a love story might seem like such a huge stretch. By page 100, Genli still has such a low opinion of Harth Estraven. It certainly was difficult to imagine him as a young mother. He was a hard, shrewd, jovial politician whose acts of kindness served his interest and whose interest was himself. His type is pan-human. I had met him on Earth and on Hein and on Olul. I expect to meet him in hell. But I do think that when the book becomes the relationship between the two, it becomes central to everything. It's something that I find interesting as well, that I, at least as the reader, learned to love Estraven a lot earlier than I does. I learned to trust Estraven a lot earlier than I does. And that's obviously partly because we are privy to Estraven's thoughts as well as I's, and I isn't. But there are some moments of dialogue where Estraven just kills it and says some of the best things of the entire book. What is love of one's country? Is it hate of one's country? Gethen is the planet that we are visiting, and for the first half of the book, we intercut between the story of Genli trying to understand the civilization of the planet and pure lore. It is rough at points to get through. It is not an easy read, and the story takes its sweet, sweet time to tell you why it's here. Estraven has always trusted and given a lot to and I has always mistrusted Estraven. They eventually will have to make a trek across the snowy mountains of the winter planet. During that time, what happens is that I learned to see Estraven for who they really are, instead of trying to apply labels of man, woman, male, and female into them. And I saw then, again, and for good, what I had always been afraid to see, and had pretended not to see in him, that he was a woman as well as a man. Any need to explain the sources of that fear vanished with the fear. What I was left with was, at last, acceptance of him as he was. When I read The Left Hand of Darkness nowadays as a non-binary person who is out proud and currently going through hormone replacement therapy, what I see is a potential for how people in my life could learn to interact with me if they are cis, in the sense that yes, the best thing that cis people can do towards trans people that they know and they're learning to love is to understand and listen to their own gender experiences and trying to stop basing their view of us on preconceived notions about either trans queer people or preconceived notions of the gender that they perceive us to have and be. And this is why the love story between Estraven and I stands out so much to me, because at the end of the day, I do think that it teaches important lessons when it comes to how to engage with other humans that might not fit into the gender binary as neatly as most people expect people to. Most of the chapters in The Left Hand of Darkness are narrated by Genly I, and Genly I has very gender essentialistic views of people and expresses that quite often. I suppose the most important thing, the heaviest single factor in one's life, is whether one's born male or female. I think it's good that he starts at a point where he has no understanding whatsoever of gender and that he holds gender essentialistic views. If you want to teach someone through a novel to see gender in a different way, we should start with someone who sees gender in a really conventional way, and I does. Women tend to eat less. It's extremely hard to separate the innate differences from the learned ones. Even where women participate equally with men in the society, they still, after all, do all the childbearing, and so most of the child rearing. At points, I think it's very clear that there are criticisms to be made towards The Left Hand of Darkness when it comes to all that. I don't think in the chapters that are from Ike's perspective at all. I think that the chapters from Ike's perspective do not need to change at all. The fact that even in the chapters narrated by Estraven, we are still using masculine and male terms is indeed a little frustrating. As I am in Camer, I would find it easier to ignore I's presence, but this is difficult in a two-man tent. And there isn't enough of an effort made in order to make the voice of I and the voice of Estraven distinct enough. Guin refers to The Left Hand of Darkness as a thought experiment.
I was not a theoretician, a political thinker or activist, or a sociologist. I was and am a fiction writer. The way I did my thinking was to write a novel. It was a heuristic device, a thought experiment.
The prompt being a society with no sex, no gender, and there would be no war. I went back to The Left Hand of Darkness this year in particular because a good friend of mine was studying it, and she asked herself if the book wasn't a little gender essentialistic in its inception, in its mythology, in its lore. When I was first asked that, I didn't even know why that could be a question. But after giving it some thought, I understand better why people could think that the way that the Gethenians exist could be gender essentialistic. Simply put, there's this idea that changing the sexual biology of humans would necessitate that gender would no longer exist. And this is a misunderstanding of what gender really is, because gender is primarily social. I do understand the will to be like, but isn't it more interesting if we have instead a society that doesn't have any difference in biology and still has no gender? And my answer to that is yes, that also sounds very interesting. I wouldn't necessarily say more, and I'll get to that in a second. But if you would rather read about that, I have good news for you. And Lackey wrote an entire trilogy. But that being said, as someone who is indeed currently going through HRT, The idea of different bodies and changes to my biology is very interesting, actually. And I wanted to mention that I read The Left Hand of Darkness before I knew that I was trans, precisely because it was this kind of mind-blown moment for my life and for my journey of trans experiences. Gethenians, they enter a phase called Kemer, and they only feel sexual desire during that phase, which lasts about 5 days every 4 weeks. That leads to them understanding the way that humans have sex as never really having a choice in the matter. The trouble is, of course, that he is, in his curious fashion, also in Kemer, always in Kemer, a strange low-grade sort of desire it must be to be spread out over every day of every year and never to know the choice of sex. I think that the way that Gethenians describe sex and sexuality in the humans that they encounter describes it so well in a way that explains so well why I dislike it so much, the type of sex and sexual drive and libido that I experience in this way. And I wish that I experienced it differently, like Gethenians, for example. One of the things that I repeat the most when it comes to my body and my experience with gender with my body is that a lot of things cannot be much worse than they currently are. That's kind of how I feel about Gethenians. Do I know for a fact that I would rather have the biology of a Gethenian than my own biology? No, I don't know that for a fact. But it sounds like a pretty safe bet. And this is where I think the book is really, really incredible for trans people, especially for closeted trans people. Some closeted trans people, I'm not going to speak for everyone. But in my case, reading The Left Hand of Darkness was just kind of like fantasizing about different bodies that I could have and different ways that I could experience body and sexualities and gender and sex in ways that were really fascinating, intriguing, and that I just wanted to learn more about and to spend longer in. Ursula K. Guin in Is Gender Necessary Redux talks about the experience of reading The Left Hand of Darkness as a safe trip into androgyny for a lot of men.
Men were inclined to be satisfied with the book, which allowed them a safe trip into androgyny and back from a conventionally male viewpoint.
And when I read that, I was shocked! I was really shocked that anyone would consider The Left Hand of Darkness a safe trip. The idea that The Left Hand of Darkness would not have changed me forever is kind of outrageous. It was one of the first times that I had more clarity in thinking, yes, bodies and biology could be different and they could be better by being different. There was nothing safe about it. It was rather one of those trips that I went to and then I just needed to go back and I wanted to stay longer and I wanted to abandon everything that I knew before behind. I also think that the idea of saying that there is no gender in Gethen is a little simplistic in some ways. What we readers understand as gender is really not as simple as something that can just be removed from a text. When we read words such as pregnant, we imbue it with gender a lot of the time.
Why did I invent these peculiar people? Not just so that the book could contain, halfway through it, the sentence, "The king was pregnant," though I admit that I am fond of that sentence.
And speaking of the reader, I also want to acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of complaint about Estraven feeling like a man. And while I understand where that's coming from, I also think that part of the challenge of the reading experience of The Left Hand of Darkness is precisely understanding that we will do that we will see Estraven as a man, and that we, the reader, have the responsibility to stop. And putting that responsibility back into Ursula K. Le Guin is ridiculous.
I was feeling defensive and resentful that critics of the book insisted upon talking only about its gender problems, as if it were an essay, not a novel.
There's an entire chapter in the book that is narrated by a woman, and we only find out that she's a woman in the last paragraph of the chapter. The book, with that chapter, makes a point of looking at the reader and saying, see, you have to do the work. You have to pay attention to not gendering the Gethenians. Because we know, we as the book know that you will be doing this. We know that you will be doing this all the time. But with the chapter, the book closes itself and already makes the thought experiment into something that is clear. Of course, there's so much politics in The Left Hand of Darkness, deliberately so. It is a book about political systems. It is a book about war and about avoiding war. It is a book about diplomacy, etc., etc. But there's a reason why a person goes alone to learn to see a new planet. It is because this way everything becomes personal, everything becomes individualized. It's the Ackman's custom, and there are reasons for it. Though in fact, I begin to wonder if I've ever understood the reasons. I thought it was for your sake that I came alone, so obviously alone, so vulnerable, that I could in myself pose no threat, change no balance, not an invasion, but a mere messenger boy. But there's more to it than that. Alone, I cannot change your world, but I can be changed by it. Alone, I must listen as well as speak. Alone, the relationship I finally make, if I make one, is not impersonal and not only political. It is individual, it is personal, it is both more and less than political. The political and the individual are inseparable. So to say that I learning to see Estraven is the story also necessitates that humans learning to see Gethenians is also the story. And if we understand humans in the context of the metaphor of the Left Hand of Darkness as pretty much cis people and Gethenians as trans people, it is about cis people learning to cross the bridge to knowing, respecting, and loving trans people.
1976, but I do not consider pronouns very important. 1988, I now consider pronouns very important.
Very few Orgota know how to cook. Hate Orgerin? No. How should I? How does one hate a country or love one? Tibbet talks about it. I like the trick of it. I know people, I know towns, farms, hills and rivers and rocks. I know how the sun and sunset in autumn falls on the side of a certain plowland in the hills. But what is the sense of giving a boundary to all that, of giving it a name and ceasing to love where the name ceases to apply? What is love of one's country? Is it hate of one's uncountry? Then it's not a good thing. It is simply self-love. That's a good thing. But one mustn't make a virtue of it, or a profession. Insofar as I love life, I love the hills of the domain of Estre, but that sort of love does not have a boundary line of hate. And beyond that, I am ignorant, I hope. I love Estraven so much.